Let's review our Sunday school lesson for today. We are still in our summer quarter that is entitled Many Faces of Wisdom. And we're still in unit number 2, dealing with wisdom in the Gospels. And we are looking at the wisdom of God that is seen in the teachings and the life of Jesus. Last week we looked at Matthew, and this week we'll be looking at the Gospel according to Luke. Our lesson for today is lesson number 6 for July 12th, 2020. It's entitled Wisdom That Amazes. Our printed text is Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1 and 7, the B part. And then Luke, the 2nd chapter, verse 39 through 52. As we think about the gospel according to Luke, it is Luke that gives us the timeline of Jesus' birth. It is Luke that tells us that Jesus' parents, Joseph and Mary, traveled from their hometown of Nazareth to be participants in the census, and they must go back to Joseph's hometown of Bethlehem, the city of David. So Luke tells us they travel to Bethlehem. There Jesus is born. They escape from Bethlehem to Egypt for a period of time, and then from Egypt they go back to Galilee and their hometown of Nazareth. It is there that the Bible tells us in verse number 40 of our text today that from the age of 1 through 12, he grew strong in the Spirit. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. It tells us that after Jesus and his family got back to Galilee and their hometown of Nazareth, on the 8th day, Jesus was circumcised according to Jewish law. And then he was presented and dedicated in the temple. And the end result of his age from 1 to 12 is that he grew in wisdom, and that he grew strong in the Spirit, and that the grace of God was upon him. Then Luke tells us that at the age of 12, the age in which Jewish men are held accountable, the age of accountability, that something interesting happened in Jesus' life. Jesus' family was a part of a traveling crew, and they joined Jews from all around the world, traveling to the central place of worship in Jerusalem, where they would celebrate the Passover, where they would celebrate the night in Egypt, that last night when the Lord delivered them with a powerful and miraculous hand. While they are there celebrating, it tells us that after the festival is over, Luke says that everyone begins to head back home. And somewhat a day's journey going back home with that traveling group. It must have been dinner time. And Mary and Joseph went to the kids' table to see if Jesus was eating his dinner, and they couldn't find him. Or it must have been they had stopped somewhere along the way for a bathroom break, and they went back to find Jesus to make sure he used the bathroom, because they weren't stopping nowhere else until they got to their destination. However it is, they found out Jesus was not with them. And 3 days later, they went back to Jerusalem and they found Jesus. Verse number 46 says, he was in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, the lawyers, and the experts of the law. And he was hearing them, meaning that there's a time, as Ecclesiastes, to listen. And then he was also asking questions, which means that there is a time to speak. So Jesus was doing both of these things at the age of 12. At the age of 12, he was doing both of these things, growing in wisdom of God. And verse number 47 says, they all were astonished at his understanding and his answers. And he was just 12 years old. Well, let's collect our lesson together and let's connect it together as we come to a close. Verse number 40 says, the child grew and waxed strong in spirit. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. And verse number 52 says, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in the favor with God and man. I want to give you two things as we close as to why Jesus grew and increased in wisdom. Number one, he was listening and studying the Word of God. He was listening and he was studying the Word of God. And secondly, he was doing the work of God. When Mary, Joseph found him, he was in the temple listening and asking questions, hearing and speaking. And when we hear the Word of God is able to give us wisdom on how to live. And then when Mary and Joseph asked him, what are you doing? He said, I must be about my Father's business. It's a reminder that if we will grow in wisdom, that we have got to walk in doing the things that God asks for us to do. So Jesus gives us a beautiful example today of how to grow in wisdom and how to have that type of wisdom that astonishes. That is, if we learn and know and eat and meditate and think about the Word of God, and if we do his will, we'll continue to walk in wisdom. May God give us all a yearning and a passion to not only know his Word, but to also